What's up, everyone? Welcome back to another review, and this time I'm going to be tackling Captain America: The First Avenger. So, I previously reviewed all the MCU movies on my channel, pretty much since I first created this thing. Looking back, I am not fond of my old reviews of the MCU. Hell, I'm not even fond of the reviews I did for the that I did last year for the new releases. So, what I did was I deleted pretty much every single video I've done on the MCU that I can have access to, and I'm pretty much going to be redoing the whole thing. But I want to do something different. I want to do it all in chronological order. You know, the MCU told the way it's intended to be told, which is from Captain America: The First Avenger all the way down to the most recent releases. Just so that way I can give a more better perspective on the MCU from the first three phases and Phase 4, and also kind of give a more clear indication about how I really feel about every single movie now that I have hindsight to work with, and how I can fit them in with the current state of the MCU itself. So without any further ado, let's get started with the first installment of MCU in chronological order, with the fifth movie, Captain America: The First Avenger. It's the fifth installment of Phase 1, yet in chronological order, it's the first movie. All right, so with all the talking out of the way, let's get down to the review. So how do I feel about Captain America: The First Avenger? Pretty much, I really like this movie. I think the Captain America trilogy is my favorite trilogy of the entire MCU, in which every single movie tops the next movie. Now, in terms of, the trilogy itself, I have my personal favorite one, which is The Winter Soldier, and when I get around to it, I can't wait. But I also like First Avenger. I think this is a very good origin story for Captain America's Steve Rogers. This is the movie that got me more interested in Captain America. I've always known who Captain America was as a kid, but as a kid, I was never really into Captain America. Captain America didn't grab my attention like an Iron Man did, or like a Hulk, or a Spider-Man, or Batman. I just found Captain America to be like, oh yeah, he's just some guy with the American flag. Okay, that's cool, whatever. But I didn't really knew, but aside from that, didn't really care about Captain America. Then I saw the movie, and I'm like, wow, Captain America, he's cool. I like Captain America, and I like Captain America in the MCU. I think Chris Evans as Steve Rogers gave a very, very earnest and honest performance as the character of Steve Rogers. Now, when Chris Evans was first cast as Captain America, I'm not gonna lie, I was against it, mainly because up to this point, Evans was more of a comedy guy. He had done Not Another Teen Movie. He was Johnny Storm in the Fantastic Four, and now you're casting him as Captain America, in which he's gonna have to cut the comedy out and have to take it more seriously. And to the credit of Chris Evans, he impressed me as Steve Rogers. This is the movie that I think really sold Chris Evans as being somebody who, when you give him the right material, he can put on very earnest performances, and he can be realistic with it. Not only that, he can come across as just really, really likable. And that's what you need to make Steve Rogers. Steve Rogers is a man out of time. He's a man from the 1940s. He has the old school American values where the world was all in black and white. Good and evil were painted very, very clearly. There were no shades of gray. That's the time that Steve Rogers came from. He came from that era of propaganda in which America would propaganda themselves as being the greatest force ever, and their enemies would propaganda America as the worst thing ever. It was like that nationalistic attitude, which is what the 1940s was really all about. Steve Rogers is from that era, and like I said, I thought Chris Evans encapsulated all that stuff really, really well with his performance in this movie. I can't say enough nice things about it. Like, he was damn good. I like the CGI effect of taking Chris Evans, who was a very, very buff dude, and making him look like he's emaciated and skinny. And then you have the Dr. Erskine character played by Stanley Tucci, pretty much using the early stage of the super soldier serum to make Chris Evans into the super soldier himself. All that stuff is handled really, really well. I like it a lot. I like the build up to that stuff. What I don't think this movie gets enough credit for is, like, aside from Chris Evans, is that this movie has a very good and strong supporting cast were to me a lot of characters that Rogers interacts with. He has his own little mini relationship. Like, like for example, you have Stanley Tucci's character of Dr. Erskine, who was a German who defected to America because he didn't like what was going on with Hitler and Johann Schmidt and the Nazis. Hitler was trying to create a super soldier serum to pretty much give himself the advantage in war. And you had Johann Schmidt, who was corrupted by this power, and you have Johann Schmidt, who was corrupted by this power. This is what caused, Erskine to flee Germany, because you can tell that these people are going to not use this for good. They're going to use it for immense evil. Hence why he defected to the United States. I thought Stanley Tucci, with the screen time he was given as Dr. Erskine, did a very good job at making him very, very likable. And I like the bond that he and Steve form. Dr. Erskine, he was touched by why Steve wants to join the army. Like, Steve doesn't want to join the army to go and kill Nazis. He wants to join the army because it's the right thing to do, and because at the end of the day, he doesn't like bullies. He hates bullies. I like how that inspired Erskine to give Steve a chance, to have Steve get the opportunity. Like, he wants to have the super soldier serum affect somebody who has a good moral compass, and not somebody who just is going to be given this immense power and then run amok with it. I like that stuff. That was handled really, really well, which is why when the Dr. Erskine character dies, to me, you feel it. Like, even though they didn't have enough screen time, they had enough in which you like them as a mentor, as a mentorly type of thing. I thought for the most part it was done very, very well. You have Haley Atwell who's playing Peggy Carter, the love interest of Steve Rogers. I like Haley Atwell in the movie. I like the character of Peggy Carter. I think her and Steve have decent on-screen chemistry with one another. Of course, you could have easily expanded upon it much, much more and developed it better. But for what we got, it is what it is. It's not horrible. But you can clearly tell that Evans and Atwell, they have some chemistry on screen together. It just would have been better if they would have gotten more scenes together to further develop the romance. But I do like the Steve's underlying story of wanting to have that dance, which is nicely paid off towards the end of the initial stages of the MCU. So pretty much the running story arc of Steve waiting for that right dance partner, that's set up in this movie, and I like it a lot because you can clearly tell he wants to be with Peggy. But of course, at the end of the movie, he has to make the ultimate sacrifice, not for himself, but for a greater good. And that further encapsulates Steve Rogers as a character as well. But I'll get to that later. You have Tommy Lee Jones, who plays Colonel Phillips. He's pretty much the guy he's pretty much Steve's commanding officer while he's in military training. I like Tommy Lee Jones. He has that great presence. I like him in this movie. He has a lot of funny lines. He's got some good quips to him here and there. And that's pretty much it. Like Colonel Phillips, like Tommy Lee Jones Tommy Lee Jones's character is not somebody who's going to change the plot if he's not in it. But just because he is, he makes it memorable because it's Tommy Lee Jones. So I can't say enough good things about him. Sebastian Stan plays Bucky Barnes, the best friend of Steve Rogers. Of course, Bucky Barnes, next to Steve, is my second favorite character in the MCU. He gets set up in this movie. I like the dynamics and relationship between Bucky and Steve. I would like with Peggy and Steve. I wish Bucky and Steve had more screen time together to establish their friendship a little better. But in the scenes we do get, I do like it and I buy it, which is why when they do Bucky's death towards the end of the end of the second act, going into the third act, I like it. I like it a lot. Like I like Bucky's death because it hits Steve in a way. It hits Steve like his best friend just died and he failed to save him. And you have this night scene where he's trying to get drunk but he can't because of his metabolism. And it kind of is reminiscent of Superman 1978, where Clark's dad died of a heart attack, and Clark has this great line that he says to his mom that even with all these powers, I still couldn't save him. I get that same vibe with Steve getting drunk in the bars. Like, even though he has these super soldier powers, he couldn't save his best friends. Like, just because you have immense power, that doesn't mean you can save everyone. And that further adds to Steve's character arc. And this is overall character in general. I like those little moments because it keeps Steve Rogers grounded, and even though he has these super soldier powers, he's still a human being first. He still has flaws first, and he still has to deal with those flaws and those emotions first. And I like that stuff. Excuse me, I like that stuff a lot. Pretty much all the actors who play Steve's Howling Commandos, they're all mini roles, but they all have nice little moments to themselves. Especially Dum Dum Dugan, who has some nice lines here and there. So I got no complaints with that. You have Toby Jones, who plays Dr. Zola. I like Toby Jones. I like him in the role of the Doctor. He's like Johann Schmidt's little psychic. Speaking of which, you have Johann Schmidt, played by the great Hugo Weaving, the Red Skull. I love Hugo Weaving in this movie. I thought this man was having a blast playing the Red Skull. He's gleefully over the top. The effect of the Red Skull of the Red Skull makeup looks fantastic. I like the look. I like the rivalry that he has with Steve Rogers. It's basically two sides of the same coin. Steve Rogers represents the positive aspects of the super soldier serum, while the Red Skull is the negative aspects of the super soldier serum. And you have these two very similar styles, yet different personalities are clashing with each other. I like it. It's played up the best way it was played up. Of course, if this movie had maybe like an extra 15 minutes, you could have easily explored it much more. But for the face value effect of it, I like it. And Rogers and Rogers and Schmidt do have some entertaining scenes with one another, especially the third act where they have a nice little fight scene on top of in a plane. So I like all that stuff. It's good. I like it. In terms of the production values of this movie, you have Joe Johnston, who's a very legendary journeyman director. He made movies like Jumanji and The Rocketeer and stuff like that. I love the early 40s aesthetic with this film. It's familiar yet heightened all at the same time. I enjoyed it. I like it. I also like the inclusion of Dominic Cooper as Howard Stark, Tony Stark's father. You know, because when you watch these movies in chronological order, you know, it it further develops the reason as to why Tony doesn't hate Steve, but he resents Steve in a way, because Tony's dad always was more fond of Captain America, and that always made Tony jealous. It's like the little brother being jealous of his older brother who gets all the attention. That's kind of the relationship that I get from it, and I like it. I like it a lot. I like seeing a young version of Howard Stark, like this very ambitious man who is bound by the technology of his time, who wants to do more, but he can't because he's limited. But every chance he does get, he'll do what he can, and I like it. And I thought Dominic Cooper was just really good as Howard Stark. Like, he didn't have a whole lot of screen time, but he made every scene count, and I liked it. And I like the little interactions he has that are peppered all throughout the movie. And I thought Cooper just fit the role fairly well. So I got no complaints about that. I like the inclusion of the Tesseract, and I like all the references to Odin and the Tree of Yggdrasil, which is from Thor lore. I like how the opening of the movie takes place in Norway, which is Thor, which is where Thor got his origins from, Scandinavian religion. I like how the Tesseract pretty much plays a role in this movie, and that's how Hydra is able to develop their weapons, because they have the Tesseract in their possessions until they finally lose it. But I also like how it also plays a factor in the end. When Captain America and Red Skull are having their final battle, the Tesseract, which is in this movie is the Space Stone, transports Schmidt into outer space. Of course, knowing what we know now, he was transported to Vormir. So I like all that stuff. I thought all that stuff was handled very, very well. The Tesseract was the MacGuffin, yes, but it wasn't the crux of the plot. The crux of the plot is basically trying to take down the Red Skull, trying to beat the Nazis, with the Tesseract being more or less this MacGuffin type of thing that is just there to further connect all these movies together when you watch them in order. But I thought it was done in a way where it didn't take away from what this movie is. And what this movie is the story of how Steve Rogers became Captain America, how he played a heavy hand in defeating the Nazis during World War II, and the ultimate sacrifice he made by pretty much crashing his plane into ice and being frozen for nearly 70 years. And we see everything that leads up to that point. And yeah, it's heartbreaking. It's heartbreaking seeing Steve Rogers, make the ultimate sacrifice, and Peggy pretty much, in her mind, pretty much, saying that Steve had to kill himself in order to save everyone else, and you can see how just defeated and crushed she is by that, because they did have a nice budding relationship that was growing throughout the course of the film, and I liked it a lot. I like how this movie, even though it has a somewhat somber ending for Steve, you still have that sense of optimism, which is what Captain America should be. He's like the symbol of optimism. He is Marvel's Superman in a way, in which he's supposed to stand for hope, truth, justice, and all that good stuff. And you do get a sense of that. And you do get a sense of that when their movie's doing their closing epilogue. Damn, what else is there for me to cover with this thing? Trying to get a few more points across before I wrap this whole thing up. Oh yeah. The action sequences in this movie, I thought they're really well done. The CGI can be a little spotty in some areas. Like, there in some areas where it can look pretty good, and then some areas where it can look really janky. The use of practical effects, it's not too bad. It's nice. It's good. I like it a lot. A lot of the fight scenes I thought are really well handled. You have this nice little montage sequence of Captain America and the Halloween Commandos, killing a bunch of Hydra squadrons, killing a bunch of Hydra soldiers, which I did like. I like the whole train sequence, which leads up to Bucky's death. I thought that was well done as well. And like I said, I like the whole third act with Red Skull and Steve. I enjoyed it. It's a battle of brawn and not really much wits, because this is 1940s. When you're doing a movie set in the 1940s, these people didn't really believe in defeating with intellect. It was all about weaponry. So I like that. I like how this movie feels. I like how this movie feels like a 1940s action movie, in terms of the whole, good versus evil and stuff like that. Like, there's no gray area. It's very simplistic, which is how that time period was in just world history. It was very simplistic. It wasn't until after World War II where the shades of gray really started to shower in and really started to pretty much, cloud everything that it encompassed. But with this, it was more of a black and white, good versus evil. Everything was all clearly defined. I like that stuff. And I thought First Avenger captured that time period very, very well. I like how this movie, takes place in the present and the beginning, and then takes place in the present to bookend it. And then what we see pretty much is a flashback / extended flashback / origin story for Steve Rogers. I like all that stuff. I like how he's found by S.H.I.E.L.D. by the government. I like how he's taken in by S.H.I.E.L.D. at the end, and we get to see Nick Fury. I like how he roams into Times Square, into modern day 2011 Times Square, and is completely baffled at what he sees. I like all that stuff. And of course, that segues into the first Avengers movie. What else? Oh yeah, like I said, to go back to the Super Soldier Serum, I like how when you watch it in chronological order, it's Erskine's Super Soldier Serum that is the baseline for what would be with Bruce Banner and the Incredible Hulk, because basically Bruce Banner took the Super Soldier Serum and pretty much heightened it and perfected it, but it had those side effects. But I like how it all starts with the first Avenger. Like, the Super Soldier Serum started out with this. When you get to the Incredible Hulk, it expands upon that lore a little bit, a little bit more. So I like all that stuff. I like that the genesis of Hulk's power was created for Captain America first. That's just like a little tidbit I wanted to throw in there. Okay, I think I'm done extending this thing for as long as I can, because I think I've covered pretty much everything there is to cover with Captain America, the First Avenger. If I missed anything, just let me know in the comment sections down below, and I'll give my opinions on it. But overall, to wrap this all up, despite, criticisms here and there when you look back at it in hindsight, I really do like Captain America, the First Avenger. This is a solid outing for a superhero character that I was never really into. And I'm glad that I saw this movie when I did in theaters, because it made me a fan of Steve Rogers. It made me a fan of Captain America. And it made me want to see more of this character in the MCU, because he had a very interesting story. Like, I like the whole concept of a man from the 1940s being stuck in modern day, and he doesn't know how to fit in, and everyone he knew, and everything he did know is now gone. So now he's struggling to adapt to a modern world that he doesn't understand. It's familiar, but very new at the same time. But that's with hindsight. But as a standalone movie about Captain America, I like it. It's solid. I love the makeup effects. I like the performances. They're all a lot of fun. The Red Skull's a great villain who I wish would have came back earlier than he did. And yeah, Captain America: The First Avenger is just a good old-fashioned superhero movie that tells a very solid story and is pretty much the inspiration for everything else that comes after it when you watch it in order. So yeah, with all that being said, I'm going to give Captain America: The First Avenger a solid 8 out of 10. I enjoyed this movie, still do, despite some qualms with it here and there in terms of character development. This is a very solid movie. It's really damn good. So yeah, 8 out of 10 for Captain America: The First Avenger. Let me know your thoughts in the comment sections down below. Like the video and subscribe, and I'll check you back next time for more.